"No man has touched me in months," said the giant Apache woman to the shy farmer. He lived at the edge of the valley, where the land slowly rose into dry hills, and the wind always seemed to whisper instead of shout. The shy farmer was a man of routine. Every morning he woke before sunrise, pulled on the same worn boots, and stepped outside to greet his small piece of land. He spoke more to his animals than to people. The soil understood him better than most humans ever had. He was not weak, but he was quiet. People mistook his silence for fear, his gentleness for lack of strength. In truth, he carried his strength inward, folded neatly behind careful words and lowered eyes. He had grown up learning that the loudest voices were not always the wisest, and that staying unnoticed was sometimes the safest way to survive. The valley knew him well. The rows of crops leaned toward him when he passed. The old barn creaked like it was greeting an old friend. But beyond his land, beyond the dirt road that cut through the fields, stood another figure who made the valley uneasy. She was known simply as the giant Apache woman. No one remembered when she first arrived. Some said she had always been there like the mountains. Others claimed she returned after many years away. What everyone agreed on was that she was different. Taller than most men, broad-shouldered, powerful in a way that made people step aside without thinking. Her presence alone seemed to quiet rooms and stop conversations. She lived alone in a small house near the rocky edge of the valley, where grass struggled to grow and the earth was hard. She worked with her hands, fixed her own fences, carried her own supplies, and asked for nothing. That independence made people uncomfortable. In a place where everyone depended on someone else, she depended on no one. People whispered about her when they thought she could not hear. They said she was angry. They said she was dangerous. They said she did not belong. Very few of them had ever spoken to her directly. Fear filled the spaces where understanding should have been. The shy farmer noticed her long before he ever met her. Sometimes he saw her from a distance, lifting heavy loads with ease, moving through the land as if it answered only to her. He admired her strength quietly, without words. Other times, he noticed how she paused at the edge of town but never entered, how she stood still for a moment as if considering whether it was worth the effort. He wondered what kind of life made a person so alone. He never planned to meet her. His life had been built carefully to avoid moments like that. But the valley had its own plans. One late afternoon, after a long day of work, the farmer noticed that part of his fence near the shared boundary had fallen. The wind had been strong the night before, and old wood did not always survive stubborn storms. He sighed, gathered his tools, and walked toward the broken section. As he approached, he realized he was not alone. She was already there. The giant Apache woman stood near the fallen posts, examining the damage. Up close, she was even more imposing than he had imagined. Her presence filled the space, not just with size, but with a kind of still strength that made the air feel heavier. The farmer stopped walking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the grass. A bird called from somewhere far away. Time stretched thin between them. He considered turning back. That would be easier. That was what he always did. But then she turned and looked at him. Her eyes were sharp but not cruel, tired but alert. There was caution there, not threat. "This fence is yours," she said. Her voice was deep, steady, and clear. He swallowed. "Yes, I mean part of it. I think the line runs right here." She nodded slowly. Storm did a number on it. He managed a small nod in return. Words felt heavier than tools in his hands. "I'll fix it. I didn't mean for it to fall onto your side." "It's fine," she said. "I was already fixing mine. We share this section." That simple statement surprised him. Not anger, not accusation, just fact. They worked in silence for a while. He held the posts while she steadied them. He hammered carefully. She lifted with ease. Their movements slowly found a rhythm, unspoken but steady. He noticed small things. The way she paused to let him finish before stepping forward. The way she didn't rush him. even when he worked slower than she could. The way her face softened when she focused on the task instead of the world. When the last post was set, she stepped back and wiped her hands on her jeans. "That should hold," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Thank you for helping." She looked at him again, more closely this time. "You live alone out here," he nodded. "Have for years." "So do I," she said. The words hung between them, heavier than the fence posts had been. She turned to leave, then stopped. "People think a lot of things about me," she said without looking back. "Most of them aren't true." He hesitated, then spoke before he could stop himself. "People think a lot of things about me too." That made her turn. For the first time, she smiled. It wasn't wide or easy, but it was real. "Then maybe," she said, "they don't know either of us." She walked away, leaving the farmer standing by the fence, heart pounding harder than it had all day. That night he couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because of something unfamiliar, curiosity, a sense that something had shifted, quietly but deeply. In the days that followed, he found himself noticing her more, but differently now. Not as a distant figure, but as someone real, someone who carried weight beyond her strength. Their paths crossed again at the creek, then at the supply road. Each time they exchanged a few more words than before, nothing forced, nothing rushed. He learned that she worked hard, not because she had to prove anything, but because it gave her peace. She learned that he listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words mattered. The valley watched. People noticed the shy farmer talking to the woman they avoided. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. Some waited for trouble, but trouble did not come. Instead, something quieter grew. Respect. Understanding. A fragile connection built not on fear, but on shared silence. Neither of them knew where it would lead. Neither of them expected more than small moments and simple conversations. But sometimes, a story does not begin with noise or drama. Sometimes, it begins with a broken fence, a shared boundary, and two lonely people finally seeing each other for the first time. The days after the fence repair did not rush forward. They moved slowly, like the valley itself, steady and patient. The shy farmer returned to his routines, but something inside him had changed. He still woke before sunrise and worked until the light softened in the evening, yet his thoughts drifted more often now. Sometimes they drifted toward the rocky edge of the valley, toward the woman who lived there. He did not seek her out. That was not his way. But the land had a habit of bringing people together when they least expected it. A few mornings later, his water pump began to fail. It was old, stubborn, and unforgiving. He tried fixing it himself, hands greasy and patience thin, but the problem went deeper than he had hoped. By midday, the sun stood high, and frustration weighed on him like a heavy coat. As he wiped his hands and stepped back, he heard footsteps on gravel. He turned, already knowing who it was before he fully faced her. She stood a short distance away, carrying a small toolbox. Her shadow stretched long across the ground. "I heard the pump," she said. "Didn't sound right," he nodded. "It's been acting up for a while." "Mind if I take a look?" she asked. He hesitated only a moment. "I'd appreciate it." They knelt beside the pump together. She studied it carefully, not rushing, not assuming. She asked him what he had tried. She listened when he answered. After a while she spoke. "The seal's worn, it's pulling air." He blinked. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I've fixed enough of these to know." Working together again felt different this time. Less tense, more natural. Their hands moved close without discomfort. Silence returned, but it was no longer awkward. It felt earned. When the pump finally sputtered back to life, steady and strong, the farmer let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't know what I'd have done if it stopped completely," she shrugged lightly. "You would have figured it out, you always do." That surprised him. "You don't know that." "I know enough," she replied. They stood there for a moment, water flowing again, the problem solved. Then unexpectedly she spoke again. "Do you ever get tired of being alone out here?" she asked. The question was not sharp or demanding. It was gentle, almost careful. He thought before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I've gotten used to it." She nodded, eyes fixed on the distance. Getting used to something doesn't mean it stops hurting. He did not respond right away. The truth of her words settled quietly. They walked toward the shade near the barn and sat on overturned crates. The air smelled of earth and metal and something calm. She spoke again, voice lower now. "People think I choose to be alone because I want to be feared." He glanced at her. "Is that true?" "No," she said simply. "I choose to be alone because it's safer than being misunderstood." He understood that more than he expected. She told him small pieces of her life. Not everything, just enough. How she had learned early that standing out made people uncomfortable. How strength became something others projected their fears onto. How silence became her shield. Then she paused. "There are other kinds of loneliness," she continued. "The kind that doesn't show on the outside." He waited. He had learned that listening was sometimes the greatest kindness. She took a slow breath. "There have been long stretches where no one came close enough to truly know me, where no one tried." Her words were honest but not dramatic. They carried weight because they were real. The farmer felt a tightness in his chest. "That sounds hard." "It is," she said. Then after a moment she added quietly, "No man has touched my life in months, not in care, not in kindness, not in a way that reminded me I mattered." She did not look at him when she said it. She stared at the horizon, jaw set, as if bracing for judgment. He felt his face warm, but not from embarrassment, from respect. Trust had been placed in his hands, and he knew better than to drop it. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Everyone deserves to feel like they matter." She turned then, surprised by the simplicity of his response. "No awkwardness, no assumptions, just truth. That's why I talk to you," she said. "You don't try to take more than what's offered." They sat in silence again, but it felt different now, deeper, more fragile. From that day on, their conversations grew longer, not all at once. Slowly, carefully. They spoke about the land, the weather, the way the valley changed with the seasons. They shared stories of mistakes and lessons learned the hard way. He told her about his childhood, about being the quiet one who stayed at the edges of rooms, about learning to work hard so his hands could speak when his voice could not. She listened without interrupting. She told him about her people, about strength that came from endurance, not dominance, about how she had been taught to stand tall, but also to stand alone if needed. The valley watched them again. People noticed the giant Apache woman spending time near the farmer's land. They noticed the shy farmer no longer lowering his gaze when she approached. Whispers returned, but louder now. Neither of them addressed it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft colors, she stopped by his place again. "I'm heading into town tomorrow," she said. "Supplies." He nodded. "Be careful." She studied him. "You worry more than you admit." He smiled faintly. "Maybe." She hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to come with me?" The question startled him. Town was not his comfort. Crowds pressed in on him. Eyes lingered too long. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," she added quickly. He considered the offer. Fear rose, familiar and sharp. But something else rose too, a quiet courage he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'll go," he said. Her smile this time was warmer. "Good." That night the farmer lay awake again, but not with restlessness, with anticipation. He did not know what the future held. He did not know how the valley or the people in it would react. But he knew this. A conversation had changed everything. Not because of what was said, but because of how it was heard. Two lonely lives, once separate and guarded, had begun to lean toward each other. Not with force, not with fear, but with honesty. And sometimes that is how the strongest connections begin. The trip into town changed the rhythm between them, even though nothing dramatic happened that day. They drove in her old truck, the engine humming steadily as the valley rolled past the windows. The farmer sat quietly at first, hands resting on his knees, watching the road. She did not rush him with questions or fill the silence. She understood that comfort sometimes came from allowing space. In town, people noticed them immediately. The giant Apache woman stepped out first, calm and steady, her posture strong. The shy farmer followed, shoulders tense, eyes lowered. A few heads turned. A few conversations paused. The air felt heavier than it had out on the open land. He almost turned back. Then he felt it, nothing dramatic, just a simple presence beside him. She did not touch him. She did not speak. She simply stood close enough that he did not feel alone. They moved through the store slowly. She asked him what he needed. He answered quietly. When others stared, she did not glare or challenge them. She ignored them, and somehow that made the staring lose its power. At the counter, the clerk hesitated for a second too long before speaking. The farmer noticed. His chest tightened, the old feeling returning, the urge to disappear. "She'll need feed delivered to this address," the woman said calmly, placing the paper on the counter. Her voice was firm, respectful, impossible to dismiss. The clerk nodded and did his job. Outside, as they loaded supplies, the farmer let out a breath. "Thank you," he said. "For earlier," she leaned against the truck, "you didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he replied, "but it still feels like I did." She looked at him closely. "That feeling doesn't belong to you. Someone else put it there." He thought about that all the way home. After that day, their lives began to weave together in small, practical ways. She helped him repair a section of roof damaged by the wind. He helped her with planting near the rocky soil, showing her small tricks he had learned over the years. They did not keep score. They did not make plans far ahead. They met when it made sense and parted when the work was done. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they worked in silence. The farmer noticed changes in himself before he noticed changes in her. He stood a little straighter. He spoke a little more, not louder, but with more certainty. When she laughed, soft and rare, he felt something warm settle in his chest. She noticed changes too. She caught herself lingering longer than necessary. She found herself sharing thoughts she once kept locked away. She slept better on nights after they talked, as if her mind finally had a place to rest. One afternoon, as they sat under the shade of a tree after hours of work, she grew quiet. "What's wrong?" he asked, surprising himself by asking at all. She hesitated. "The community meeting is coming up." He nodded. He had heard about it. Land issues, boundaries, old disagreements resurfacing. "They're talking about changing access to the shared road," she continued. "Some people think I shouldn't be using it." His jaw tightened. "That road's been there longer than any of us." "Logic doesn't always win," she said. He wanted to promise something, to fix it, to protect her from yet another fight she did not ask for, but he knew better now than to make empty promises. "What are you going to do?" he asked. She shrugged. "I'll show up like I always do." The thought of her standing alone in a room full of judgment made something twist inside him. "I can come," he said before fear could stop him. She looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," he replied. "But I want to." The meeting was held in a small hall that smelled of dust and old wood. Chairs scraped the floor as people settled in. The farmer sat beside her, hands clasped, heart pounding. He had avoided places like this his whole life. Voices rose, complaints were aired. Assumptions were made. Some people spoke about her without looking at her, as if she were not in the room. "She keeps to herself," one man said. "That's not how community works." The farmer felt his pulse in his ears. "She's different," another added. "People don't feel comfortable." That word again, comfortable. He glanced at her. Her face was calm, but her shoulders were tight. He saw the cost of standing tall for so long. Before he could talk himself out of it, he stood. The room quieted. "I'm not good at speaking," he began, voice steady despite the fear shaking inside him. "But I know this land, and I know what's fair." People turned fully now, surprised. "She hasn't taken anything that wasn't hers," he continued. "She fixes what she uses. She respects the land. She respects people even when they don't return it." A murmur rippled through the room. "She's my neighbor," he said simply, "and I trust her." He sat down, heart racing. The meeting ended without a clear decision, but something had shifted. The conversation had changed tone. The road remained open for now. Outside, she stopped him. "You didn't have to do that," she said again, but her voice was different now. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes bright with something unspoken. "No one has ever stood up like that for me before," he shrugged, embarrassed. "Someone should have." From that night on, the bond between them deepened, not because of grand gestures, but because of shared courage. They spoke more openly now, about fears, about hopes they had buried, about what it meant to feel seen after years of being overlooked. The farmer admitted he had never thought of himself as brave. She told him bravery wasn't loud. It was choosing to act even when your voice shook. She admitted that strength had become a wall she hid behind. He told her it didn't have to be a prison. The valley noticed the change too. Some people softened. Others held onto their judgments, but fewer spoke openly now. Fewer stared. One evening, as the sky darkened and stars appeared one by one, they sat on the steps of his porch. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "how different life might have been if people had listened earlier?" "Yes," he said. "But I also wonder how different it might be now that someone finally is." She smiled, slow and thoughtful. They did not define what they were becoming. They did not rush to name it. They let it exist as it was, real, growing, and built on trust. Two lonely lives, once guarded and separate, were no longer walking alone. And though challenges still waited ahead, they faced the future with something they had both been missing for a long time. Someone beside them. The change between them did not go unnoticed. In a small valley, nothing ever stayed private for long. People watched how the shy farmer and the giant Apache woman moved together now, not close enough to invite gossip, but not distant enough to ignore. They worked side by side more often. They shared quiet meals on the porch when the days grew long. They spoke with ease that came only from trust. For a while, it felt like the valley itself was holding its breath. Then pressure returned, slow and heavy. It began with small things, a delivery that arrived late, a note left on her gate about property lines, a comment muttered when she passed through town. None of it was loud enough to demand attention, but all of it carried the same message: you are still not welcome. She did not complain. She never had. She handled problems the way she always did, alone, steady, controlled. But the farmer noticed the signs. The way her jaw tightened when she read a letter. The way she stayed quiet longer than usual after town trips. The way her laughter faded, replaced by careful silence. One evening, as they repaired a tool shed together, he finally spoke. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself," he said. She paused, hammer midair. "I've been doing it my whole life." "I know," he replied gently. "That doesn't mean you have to keep doing it." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if measuring whether the ground beneath her was solid enough to step onto. "They're pushing again," she admitted. "About the land, about the road, about me." Anger rose in him, sharp and unfamiliar. "What are they saying now?" She exhaled slowly. "That I'm a problem waiting to happen, that someone like me doesn't fit into their idea of community." "That's not true," he said without hesitation. "I know," she replied, "but knowing doesn't always stop them." A notice arrived the following week. Official. Cold, written in careful words that left no room for feeling. There would be a review, a discussion about access, residency, and compliance. She was asked to attend. She held the paper in her hands, staring at it for a long time. "I've faced worse," she said. "I'll handle it." He shook his head. "Not alone," she hesitated. "They'll turn on you too." "They already have," he said quietly. "I just didn't notice before." The day of the review came with gray skies and low clouds. The building was larger this time, the room more formal. Faces were familiar but less friendly. The farmer felt the old fear clawing back, telling him to sit down, to stay quiet, to disappear. But when she walked in beside him, shoulders squared, step steady, he felt something else rise stronger than fear. Resolve. The discussion dragged on. Words were chosen carefully. Accusations were wrapped in polite language. Questions were asked that were not really questions at all. "She keeps to herself," one voice said. "That creates distance." "She doesn't participate," another added. "That creates concern." Finally, she spoke. "I keep to myself because I was taught to respect space," she said calmly. "I participate when I'm invited with honesty, not suspicion." Some shifted uncomfortably. Then the farmer stood again. "I've lived here my whole life," he said. "I know what community looks like. It looks like helping without asking for something back. It looks like showing up when someone needs you." He took a breath. "She does that, quietly, consistently, more than most." A pause followed. The decision was delayed, no resolution. No victory, but no loss either. Outside, rain began to fall lightly. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "They still don't know what to do with me," he smiled. "Neither do I, but I'm learning." The pressure did not break them. It tested them. In the weeks that followed, the farmer faced his own challenges. Neighbors who once nodded politely now avoided his eyes. Work opportunities grew scarce. Help was offered less freely. Some nights, doubt crept in. "Maybe this would be easier if you didn't have to deal with me," she said once, voice low. He turned to her, surprised and hurt. "Don't say that. I don't want your life to be harder because of mine." He thought carefully before answering. "My life was already hard. I just didn't know why. Now I do." She studied his face, searching for uncertainty. She found none. Slowly, something shifted inside her. A wall she had built over years of survival began to crack, not collapse, just open enough to let light in. She began to lean on him in small ways, asking for help, sharing worries, allowing herself rest. He grew stronger in ways he never expected, speaking up when it mattered, holding steady under pressure, choosing connection over comfort. The valley changed too, not completely. Not perfectly, but enough. A neighbor stopped by one afternoon with extra supplies. Someone else offered help with a fence. A child waved when she passed. Small things, but meaningful. One evening, as they watched the sun sink behind the hills, she spoke softly. "I spent so long believing I had to be unbreakable," she said. "That strength meant never needing anyone." He nodded. "I spent just as long believing I was fragile," she smiled. "Turns out we were both wrong." They sat there, side by side, not touching, not needing to. The air between them felt steady, earned. The future was still uncertain. Challenges remained. Opinions would not change overnight, but something had already been won. Fear no longer decided their steps. They had chosen each other, not as an escape, not as a shield, but as equals. And that choice, quiet and firm, was stronger than anything the valley could throw at them. The season changed quietly, the way it always did in the valley. The air cooled, the mornings grew softer, and the land seemed to breathe a little easier. For the first time in a long while, the shy farmer noticed that he was breathing easier too. Life did not suddenly become perfect. Problems did not disappear, but something steady had taken root, something strong enough to hold them both when the ground felt uncertain. The review about the land never returned with another notice. No one apologized, but no one pushed further either. It was as if the valley had decided to move on, slowly and carefully, just like the two people at its edge. The giant Apache woman continued her work as she always had, but with one difference. She no longer carried every burden in silence. When something broke, she asked for help. When something weighed on her mind, she spoke it aloud. Each time she did, the farmer listened, not to fix, not to control, but simply to understand. And that understanding changed her more than she expected. She found herself smiling more often, sleeping more soundly, trusting the quiet moments instead of preparing for the worst. Strength no longer meant standing alone. It meant knowing when to lean. The farmer changed too. He noticed it first in small ways. He spoke up at the supply store without rehearsing every word in his head. He met people's eyes without flinching. When others questioned his choices, he no longer shrank away. He answered calmly, clearly, without apology. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped him by the road. "You've changed," the man said. The farmer thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think I finally know who I am." That evening he told her about the conversation. She smiled, proud in a quiet way that did not need words. "You were always strong," she said. "You just didn't believe it yet." As the months passed, their connection deepened, not through grand gestures but through shared life. Morning coffee on the porch, long walks along the fence line, evenings spent watching the sky shift colors as the sun disappeared behind the hills. They spoke about the past without pain now, about mistakes, losses, and roads not taken. Those stories no longer defined them. They simply explained how they arrived here. One night, as a cool breeze moved through the valley, she broke the silence. "I used to think being seen meant being judged," she said. "Now I know it can also mean being understood." He nodded. "I used to think being quiet meant being weak," she glanced at him. "And now I know it means I choose my words carefully." She laughed softly, the sound warm and full. The valley, once so watchful, had grown used to them. People still noticed the difference between them, their size, their ways, but it no longer carried the same weight. Familiarity softened what fear once sharpened. Children waved when she passed. A shopkeeper greeted her by name. Small signs, but powerful. One afternoon, the farmer found her sitting by the creek, staring at the water. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked. She smiled faintly. "I was thinking about how long I spent believing I didn't belong anywhere." "And now?" he asked. "And now I realize belonging isn't about being accepted by everyone," she said. "It's about being accepted by the right person." He sat beside her, letting the water's sound fill the space. They never rushed to define what they were. They did not need labels or promises spoken too soon. What they had was real, and that was enough. One morning she brought him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" he asked. "Something from my family," she said. "A reminder of where I come from." He held it carefully, understanding the weight of what she was sharing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For trusting you," she replied. As winter approached, they prepared together. Wood stacked, roofs checked, supplies stored. Every task felt lighter when shared. On the first cold night, they sat by the fire, the room warm and still. "You know," she said, staring into the flames, "there was a time when I thought no one would ever choose to stay." He looked at her, heart steady. "I'm here." She met his eyes. "I know." Outside, the wind moved through the valley, but inside there was calm. Their story did not end with celebration or applause. It ended the way real stories often do, with quiet certainty. Two people who had spent years misunderstood found understanding in each other. Two lives shaped by isolation found connection, not because they needed to be saved, but because they chose to walk forward together. And in that choice, they built something lasting, stronger than fear, deeper than judgment, and rooted firmly in respect. The valley remained the same in many ways, but for them, everything had changed.